Okay, first thing we're going to do is take out, I've already pre-loosened all the bolts on the side cover, and I always take my bolts out and put them in order that I took them out, because they do come out in different lengths. Pulling the cover off, basically just pull the retainer. You have a bearing inside here. We'll lube that up when we put it back. We're going to clean this off before we put it back up. Okay, the next step is to take the 22mm front bolt off and use a deep well socket, because you've got the tit sticking out from the shaft. So you remove the outside 22mm nut and washer, set that off to the side. Next step would be to pull the sheave off. Best thing to do is to hold your thumbs on the inside cam plate. Take your rest of your fingers, both hands, hold the sheave as a sandwich, pull it straight out. We're going to have to reuse Butch's cam plate assembly. So what we have to do is we have to take the grease retaining cover off and take the cam plate out. So what I have to do is I have to break the 4 screws loose. And what you want to do is you want to put a lot of down pressure on these when you try to break them, because they're torqued pretty tight.
Why they move? Yeah.
Okay, so once you take the cover off, you'll see inside you have an O-ring, and this is your cam plate, which has fully been greased, and your sheave and your rollers. And now, the next thing to do, because we have to reuse this cam plate, we have to clean all the grease off of this. Taking the clutch and we've cleaned all the components up. We'll show you a reassembly when we get to that point. But the next thing is pull the slider off. This is the inner roller bearing that the sheave actually works on. And before we reinstall this, we're going to put the 1mm shim in back of this before we put it back on. This will have some oil on it. I don't clean it because it should be lubed. We put it back in, leave it just the way it is. The next thing to do will be to pop the belt off. Basically, the easiest way is just like that. We are going to replace this belt. You can see the side of it's pretty dull. That means it's not glazed up. So actually this belt's in really good shape. But because we're going all new, we'll use the new belt, and this will go up on the wall for a spare. Next thing to come out, the fix sheave on the inside. Next thing to do here would be to inspect the main seal on the side of the engine. Make sure that you got no oil, weepage, anything like that. This is all good, no problems with it. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our fix sheave and the brand new machine sheave that we have, and what we're going to do is we're going to surface the faces with scuff pads on them. So basically you can see that they both come in pretty polished. I like to scuff them, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the scuffing pad out and we're going to do that. What I basically use is just a 3M Scotch-Rite pad on an air grinder, die grinder. Got the new sheave. We just cleaned up the faces of both sheaves, set them off to the side. This is the new machine sheave. They machine the outside of the roller ramp. Some manufacturers, this happens to be UTVs, they manufacture the inside of the roller ramp on the hub, and basically what that does is allow the rollers to ride down farther and give you a lower gear ratio. No grease, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the rollers. This has a wear sleeve on one side and not on the other, so I always put the wear sleeve to the right when I put them in the ramps. And you will see that when it turns, any of the thrust of throwing the roller, this will help with sided protection for wear. Have the cam plate, and what you have to do is we're going to put greaseless sliders, which are identical to the original sliders, except this is again the same material as the outside covering of the roller. There is a clip that goes in the back. Slide the clip in the back of these, okay, and then slide it like that. Very simple. And the sheave is assembled. ready for installation just as it is. On this assembly, we don't need to use the cap, we don't need to use the O-ring, we don't need to use the hardware, we don't need to use any of that because it's unsprung weight. It's not needed. It'll rev faster without all that extra weight. We're now ready with this assembly. So what we're going to do is just leave this off to the side, and now we're going to move on to the secondary sheave. Secondary sheave has no tension on it whatsoever. So you have to hold it. I use a pair of leather possum gloves because it makes it just a little easier to hold it. I'm going to use the gun again to get it off. Hold on to it. Remove secondary shiv assembly. Next step with this is going to be, we're going to take the spring assembly off and change it to the blue spring. What you have to do is use an 1 13/16 1 13/16 socket, and we break it loose. Well, there it is, it came off. Close the sheave back up, the sheave on here, put our new spring, make sure it sits nice and flush inside the inner retainer. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to put the outer retainer, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put the nut, and then we're going to put on the top. And we're going to try to compress this spring by hand. Okay, once this bottoms out, you'll have a loose nut in here. But what you'll do is you'll have the thread sticking out, and you can take your nut back on, tighten it as tight as you can by hand. Okay, once you will go no farther, just release this and your spring's installed. Okay, next thing we're going to do, put the gun on it. We're going to torque it down. You take the two longest bolts that are the same length and you screw them inside your sheave. But the reason you do this is you want to spread the sheave as far apart as you can. You've opened the sheave up, that's going to allow us to put the belt in. So now what we're going to do is we're going to slide this back on the sheave, on the shaft. We're going to take our nut, put our nut back on. You want to make sure that you wipe down all of the machined sheave faces, both the secondary and the primary. You want to put the fixed sheave on. Make sure it goes onto the spline and it sits nice. Today we're using a 1mm shim mod. We're going to take the 1mm shim. We're going to slide that onto the shaft. Then we're going to take our roller bearing and we're going to slide that back on. We'll put the belt on. Most of the guys know this, but the belt has arrows for direction. So you want to make sure it's always facing forward. The belt on inside shaft. Next thing is we take our sheave, hold our fingers on it so that the cam plate and rollers don't fall out. Take our sheave, slide it on. Compress that belt a little bit in the center so we can get this to slide on as far as possible. Okay, there you go. You will feel it bottom out. It will ride up against the inner roller and it will go no farther. You want to make sure that you can see a little bit of spline coming through the shaft. If you don't, do not assemble this. You have to start all over again. We have spline showing. We put on our washer, put on our nut. Now once we have it all hand tight, we're going to put the gun on, tighten it down a little, and the basic assembly is complete. I hook up a common ratchet strap, I hook it to the back A-frame, wrap it around the outside most part of the sheave, and get it as tight as humanly possible. Then basically use your torque wrench. The setting on this is 90 pounds. Basically, just double check it, get your socket on there, make sure you got your torque, and you're safe. We're going to show you for demonstration purposes how the belt actually works. We're not putting the outer support on yet. You don't want to super rev this really high for long periods of time. We're doing this for a demo, but that cage is to support the outer part of the shaft. As you give it a little bit of fuel, you see it working? The centrifugal force of the rollers inside here will push out and push this in. And basically we got a perfectly working clutch setup.